Clara Whitcomb stood beneath the white wedding tent, with a veil trembling over her face, when the groom refused to take her hand and called her a woman without a name. The whole town of Mercy Creek heard him say it. The banker's daughter was no daughter at all, no bride fit for a decent man, no lawful soul he could marry before God. Her father, Hiram Whitcomb, sat in the front row with his silver watch clenched in his fist and would not rise to defend her. Outside, a train whistle split the prairie wind, and dust rolled under the tent like judgment. Clara looked at the preacher, then at the man who had just ruined her, and walked down the aisle alone. Before we begin, let me know where you are watching from. Leave your country name in the comments below. And if you love stories about courage, loyalty, and community, be sure to subscribe so you don't miss the next stories. The tent did not empty right away. Mercy Creek had gathered for a wedding, and the town did not know how to behave when a wedding turned into a public hanging without a rope. The white canvas snapped in the prairie wind. Lanterns swung from poles, though the sun was still high, their glass chiming softly as if afraid to make too much sound. On one side sat the ranch families in their brushed coats and Sunday bonnets. On the other sat the town merchants, the bankers' clients, the sheriff, the church ladies, the school children, and every person who had ever owed Hiram Whitcomb money or asked him for mercy. At the front stood Jasper Vale in a gray wedding coat, handsome as a portrait and cold as iron under snow. His mother, Mrs. Lavinia Vale, held a folded paper against her breast like it was scripture. The preacher's Bible remained open, but his finger had lost its place. Clara could feel the whole town staring at her veil. Only moments before, the preacher had asked Jasper to take her lawful name before God and witnesses. Jasper had smiled at first, the smooth, careful smile he wore at the bank when he spoke to her father. Then, a boy had pushed through the side flap of the tent, carrying a telegram envelope, and Jasper had opened it with a show of reluctance that turned Clara's stomach before she understood why. Now his words still hung in the dusty air. No marriage can stand when the bride's name is false. Clara had not cried. That was the first thing the town noticed. She did not faint, though two women leaned toward her as if hoping she might. She did not plead with Jasper. She did not reach for her father. She stood with her gloved hands folded over the white satin dress Hiram had ordered from St. Louis, a dress too fine for the dry little cattle town around her, and she felt every stitch turn heavy as chain. "My name is Clara Whitcomb," she said. Jasper's eyes flicked toward Hiram. "That is what you were taught to say." A low murmur passed through the tent. Clara looked at her father then. Hiram Whitcomb was a narrow man with a silver beard, a pressed black suit, and eyes that could measure cattle, land, and debt without touching a ledger. He had raised Clara in the rooms above the bank, taught her numbers before she could braid her hair, and corrected her handwriting until each letter stood straight and proud. He had never been tender in public, but Clara had believed there was loyalty under his sternness. "Father," she said, and the single word cracked more than she meant it to. Hiram's jaw worked once. He did not stand. Mrs. Vale rose with a rustle of silk. "The territorial office has no record of Clara Whitcomb's birth. No baptism, no lawful adoption, no mother of record, no name. That is enough," the preacher said weakly. But it was not enough for Jasper. He turned so every witness could see the pain he had dressed himself in. "I was willing to marry a banker's daughter," he said. "I cannot marry a nameless girl passed off as one." Clara's face burned beneath the veil, but her body had gone cold. She reached up, removed the veil, and laid it across the preacher's Bible. Her hair, pinned with pearl combs, loosened in the wind. A strand blew across her cheek. The aisle seemed longer going out than it had coming in. Her shoes crushed white wildflowers the children had scattered. Men shifted their boots out of her way. Women looked down at their laps somewhere near the back. A child whispered, "Mama, where will she go?" Clara did not know. At the open flap of the tent, she stopped because someone stood in her path. Luke Ransom had not come dressed for a wedding. His coat was clean but old, his hat held low in one hand, his face browned by sun and scored by weather. He owned a hard piece of land north of town, where the creek bent through cedar and stone. He had married a wife 3 years ago, and raised a small daughter with the help of an old aunt and no one else. He rarely spoke unless words were needed. Once before his marriage, Clara had waited for him to ask her to walk with him after a harvest supper. He had not. Later, she heard he had taken another woman to wife because a poor rancher needed a woman who could work, not a banker's daughter with soft hands. Now Luke looked at her as if none of the town existed. "Miss Whitcomb," he said quietly, "your wagon is penned behind the livery. If you mean to leave, I will fetch it." Behind her, Jasper let out a breath that might have been a laugh. "Careful, Ransom. You do not know what name you are defending." Luke did not look at him. "I know who is standing alone." Clara's throat tightened. She walked past Luke into the daylight. The heat struck hard. Beyond the tent, Mercy Creek stretched in a thin line of wooden fronts and false signs. Bank, mercantile, bathhouse, saloon, church, sheriff's office, feed store, and depot. The train had just pulled away, leaving smoke and cinders drifting above the tracks. Horses stamped at hitching rails. Dust climbed over everything. Clara had walked that street all her life as Hiram Whitcomb's daughter. She had crossed it to deliver bank notices, to buy sugar, to attend church, to carry soup to sick families when her father told her charity should be seen, but not wasteful. Every board, every porch seemed to know her step. Now, with one folded paper and one father's silence, the street did not know her at all. Luke brought the wagon without asking where to take it. Clara climbed up before anyone could help her. When Jasper came out of the tent, calling her name as if he still owned the right to use it, she took the reins. "Clara, this can be settled," Jasper said. "Come back, sign the proper papers, and there need not be more disgrace." She looked down at him from the wagon seat. "There is already disgrace enough." Then she snapped the reins and the horse lurched forward. Luke mounted his bay and rode beside her through town. Not close enough to claim her, not far enough to abandon her. People watched from windows and porches. Clara kept her face forward. The wedding dress shone against the dust like a flag of surrender she refused to lower. She did not go to the bank. She could not bear the rooms above it. The desk where her father had taught her to add columns. The bed where she had cried after her mother's funeral, though Hiram said grief should be tidy. She turned instead toward the old schoolhouse at the edge of town, a one-room building abandoned after the new church hall was razed. Its windows were dusty, its stove coal, but it had a roof and a door that shut. Luke followed her there. When the wagon stopped, he dismounted and tied his horse to the post. Clara remained seated, hands locked around the reins. "My father knew," she said. Luke stood beside the wheel. "It looked that way. He let me stand there." Yes, the honesty hurt worse than comfort would have. Clara looked at the schoolhouse, then at the open road beyond it. "I have money in the bank, my bay, my clothes, my books, my mother's things, my bay." She understood him then. If Hiram chose not to acknowledge her, the bank door might be closed to her. Her own room might become a vault. "What am I to do?" she whispered. Luke's gaze moved over the wedding dress, the bruised look around her mouth, the dust gathering on the satin hem. "First," he said, "get out of the sun." Inside the schoolhouse, the air smelled of chalk, old wood, and mice. Clara stood among overturned benches, while Luke opened windows and checked the stovepipe. He found a broom in the corner and swept the place clean without speaking. When he finished, he set a tin cup from his saddlebag on the teacher's desk and poured water from his canteen. She took it with both hands. "You needn't stay," she said. "I know. Then why are you?" He looked toward town. where the wedding tent still glowed white in the distance. Because wolves come quicker when they smell blood by dusk, the wolves came wearing good coats. Jasper arrived first with the sheriff, Lavinia Vale, and two men from the bank. Clara had changed nothing except removing her gloves. She still wore the wedding dress because she had nothing else. Luke sat on the steps outside, sharpening a pocket knife against a whetstone, the slow scrape steady as breathing. Jasper stopped before him. "This is a family matter." Luke did not rise. "Then send her family." The sheriff cleared his throat. Sheriff Dodd was broad in the belly and fond of easy authority. "Ransom, don't make difficulty. Mr. Vale says Miss Whitcomb is upset and might be holding property that belongs to the bank household." Clara stepped into the doorway. "My dress, my shoes, my skin." Jasper's expression softened in that practiced way she now hated. "Clara, your father is unwell. You must understand what today has done to him." "What today has done to him?" "He has maintained a deception for years. The burden must be terrible." Clara almost laughed, but no sound came. "And you relieved him of it at the altar." Mrs. Vale lifted her chin. "Better before vows than after." "What do you want?" Clara asked. Jasper took a folded document from inside his coat. "Only to settle matters before the town tears itself into gossip. Sign this acknowledgement that you hold no claim as Hiram Whitcomb's lawful heir, and my family will make certain you are provided for quietly. A room somewhere decent. A small allowance until other arrangements can be made." "A name too?" Clara asked. "Will you provide that?" His eyes hardened. Luke's knife stopped moving. Sheriff Dodd shifted his weight. "Best read before signing." Miss Jasper glanced at him sharply, but Clara had already reached for the paper. She read by the fading light. The words were formal, cruel, and clean. She was to renounce any claim to the Whitcomb estate, any bank shares, any land held in trust, any household property, and any allegation against Jasper Vale concerning the failed wedding. At the bottom, a blank waited for her signature. Clara held it out to Luke. "Would you put this in the stove?" Jasper's face flushed. "That is not wise." "No," Clara said. "It is not obedient. There is a difference." Luke took the paper, went inside, and fed it to the coal stove. There was no fire, so the paper merely sat there, pale and waiting. Somehow, that made it better. It would burn when she chose. Jasper stepped close enough that Clara could smell bay rum on him. "You think this rancher will save you? His mortgage sits in your father's bank. One call of that note, and he loses his land." Luke's eyes lifted. Clara looked from one man to the other. The first misunderstanding of the day cleared like smoke for a moment, revealing another, older one. "You know his mortgage terms?" she asked Jasper. "I know everything worth knowing in this town." Luke rose then, slow and quiet. "Not everything." The sheriff, perhaps sensing trouble, put a hand on Jasper's arm. "Come on, let her sleep on it." Jasper backed away, but his voice carried. "By morning, Mercy Creek will know you refused a decent settlement. They will not be kind." After they left, Clara stood in the doorway until the last horse turned toward town. Luke picked up his hat. "You should bar the door tonight." "You think he will come back?" "I think men do not bring papers unless they fear what might be written elsewhere." The words settled between them. Clara turned toward him. "You said his mortgage sits in my father's bank. Is that true?" "It is. And if Jasper influences the bank, he might call it." "Because of me?" Luke gave a faint shake of his head. "Because of land, because of water, because men like Jasper do not need a good reason when profit will do." She studied him in the dusk. "Why did you defend me in town, truly, for the first time?" Luke looked away. "Years ago," he said, "I came to the bank with a question I meant to ask you after. Clara's breath caught. Your father told me you had laughed at the notion of a dirt rancher seeking your hand. Said you were promised to a better future. I never said that. I know it now. She gripped the doorframe. I waited that night after the harvest supper. You walked past me as though I were glass. Your father had already answered for you. He told me you married Anna Prout because she brought 2 milk cows and 20 acres. Pain moved across Luke's face, old and deep. Anna brought a brave heart and a weak chest. The land was her brother's, not mine. Clara closed her eyes. The wedding tent, Jesper's accusation, her father's silence, all of it widened into something older. A life had been bent by words. Neither of them had spoken. When she opened her eyes, Luke had stepped off the porch. I will come by at first light, he said. My aunt has plain clothes that might fit. You cannot face wolves in satin. Clara almost smiled then, though it hurt. Mr. Ransom, he turned. My name might be in question, but I remember my manners. Thank you. His gaze held hers a moment. Clara, he said, not Miss Whitcomb, not nameless, not anything Jasper could touch, just Clara. Then he mounted and rode into the dock. Morning came with church bells, though it was not Sunday. Someone rang them because Mercy Creek did not know how else to announce scandal. By the time Luke returned, Clara had slept little. She had found an old slate in the schoolhouse and written every fact she knew in neat columns, as her father had taught her. Date of birth, according to Hiram. Mother's name, according to Hiram. Baptism, never seen. Adoption paper, never seen. Family Bible, kept locked in Hiram's study. Jasper's telegram, seen by all but not by her. Hiram's silence settlement paper. The list did not give her a name, but it gave her ground beneath her feet. Luke brought clothes wrapped in brown paper. A calico dress, wool stockings, a shawl, and boots a little too large. His aunt had also packed bread, hard cheese, and a jar of preserves. Clara changed behind a curtain made from an old map of Kansas. When she stepped out, the wedding dress lay folded on the teacher's desk like a dead swan. Luke looked once and then away. Better. Your aunt has my gratitude. She said gratitude is acceptable, but she would rather have the dress. She can cut it into altar cloths if you do not mind. Clara looked at the satin. Yesterday it had been a bride's promise. Today it was cloth. She might have it. A faint warmth touched his eyes. That will please her. He took Clara not into town but north toward his ranch. The ride passed through open prairie, washed gold by morning sun. Larks lifted from the grass. The wind carried the dry smell of sage and horse sweat. Mercy Creek fell behind them, small and watchful. Luke's ranch was not grand. A low cabin sat near a stand of cottonwoods, with a barn patched in 3 kinds of lumber, a corral, a smokehouse, a chicken yard, and fields stubbornly green, where irrigation ditches caught water from cedar draw. Beyond the pasture rose rough hills, where cattle moved like dark stones. A little girl waited on the porch with a rag doll under one arm. This is Nell, Luke said. My daughter. Nell was 6, solemn-eyed, with 2 uneven braids and her father's guarded stare. She looked Clara up and down. Aunt Mercy says you was left at the altar, Nell, Luke said. Clara knelt so they were eye to eye. Aunt Mercy is not wrong, though I did some leaving myself. Nell considered this. Did you cry? Not where they could see. The child nodded, accepting the answer as sensible. Papa says crying is full when the bucket's full. Clara looked up at Luke. He cleared his throat. I did not expect her to repeat that. For the first time since the tent, Clara laughed softly. It surprised all 3 of them. And Mercy Ransom ruled the cabin with a cane, a sharp tongue, and the kind of kindness that pretended to be irritation. She was Luke's mother's sister, thin as a fence rail, with white hair braided down her back. So, she said when Clara entered, you are the girl Mercy Creek says has no name. Clara lifted her chin. Yes, ma'am. Aunt Mercy pointed at the table. Then sit. Nameless girls each same as named ones. Ranch life did not wait for sorrow. Before noon, a calf was found tangled in a low stretch of wire near the creek. Luke took a rope and knife. Clara, unwilling to sit in the cabin like a porcelain piece, followed. The calf kicked and bawled while its mother paced nearby. Stay back, Luke warned. But when the calf twisted, cutting deeper into its hide, Clara stepped close and pressed both hands against its neck as Luke worked the wire free. Mud smeared her sleeves. The animal's panic shook through her bones. Easy, she whispered. Easy now. No one is asking your name. Luke's knife paused for half a breath. Together, they freed it. When the calf stumbled to its mother, Clara found her hands trembling. Blood and mud darkened her palms. Luke handed her a rag. You did not have to help. I know. You might have been hurt. I know that too. He gave her a look she could not read, then turned toward the creek. Washed there, at the water's edge, Clara knelt and scrubbed her hands. Mud came off. Blood took longer. She stared at the red swirling away and thought of the settlement paper waiting in the schoolhouse stove. That evening, while Aunt Mercy mended and Nell slept by the hearth, Luke spread his ranch accounts across the table. He had not asked Clara to look, but the habit of numbers drew her eye. You are paying 9% on this note, she said. Luke leaned back. 12. Clara frowned. The original line says 9. The bank said there was a renewal penalty after Anna died. My eye. He pushed the paper toward her. Clara bent over the note. The lamp smoked softly. Outside, coyotes called beyond the pasture. She traced the ink with one finger, careful not to smudge it. This line was added later, she said. Luke's face changed. You are certain? The hand is similar, but not the same. My father makes a loop on his capital R with a sharper return. This is copied. Also, the ink feathered differently. This line was written when the paper was older. Aunt Mercy stopped mending. Luke's voice lowered. That penalty cost me 2 horses last winter. Clara's stomach turned. I helped file these notes. You did not write that, no. But I worked beneath the roof that kept it. Silence settled. Luke gathered the papers slowly. Can you prove it? IRFC, the bank's ledger. Aunt Mercy snorted. Might as well ask a rattler for its fang. Clara stared into the lamp flame. Then, I must find another way. For the next days, the ranch gave her no room to collapse. She rose before dawn to help Aunt Mercy knead bread, carried water, read with Nell, and learned the difference between a cow too stubborn to move and a cow too sick to stand. She tore one dress, blistered both heels, and discovered that hunger after honest labor tasted cleaner than cake served in a room full of lies. Luke never treated her like a guest to be displayed or a burden to be endured. He gave her work and expected her to learn. When she failed, he showed her again. When she succeeded, he said little, but she felt his approval in the quiet way he handed her the next task. Trust did not arrive as a confession. It came in small, practical offerings. He left a lantern burning when she crossed the yard after dark. She set aside the best biscuit for him. When he returned late from mending fence, he showed her how to hold a horse's hoof without fear. She balanced his accounts and found 3 more charges that did not belong. He carved Nell a new slate pencil after Clara said the child had a quick mind. She wrote a letter to the county clerk requesting any record of a child found near Mercy Creek 24 years before, though she did not yet know whether she wanted an answer. On the 5th evening, Luke found her by the corral, watching sunset burn along the hills. Town says Jasper has taken a desk at the bank, he said. Clara's hands tightened on the rail. My father allowed that? Your father has not been seen outside since the wedding. She swallowed. He is either ill or ashamed. Could be both. A horse moved in the corral, blowing softly. Clara said, I keep thinking of all the people who watched. Some of them had known me since I was small. Mrs. Peabody taught me hymns. Mr. Larkin sold me peppermint sticks. Sheriff Dodd carried me across the street once when floodwater covered the road, and none of them stood. Luke leaned his arms on the rail beside her. Towns are brave in stories. In daylight, most folks wait to see who has the power. Did you not fear Jasper calling your note? I feared it, but you stood. Luke looked toward the hills. Anna died in that cabin while I was away fetching the doctor. By the time I came back, there were 6 women around her bed and none could meet my eye. After that, I learned a man can survive being too late, but he does not forgive himself for it. Clara's anger softened into something sadder. You were not too late for me, she said. He did not answer, but his hand, resting on the rail between them, turned palm up. Clara looked at it a long moment before placing her hand in his. They stood that way until the sun went down. The first proof arrived with rain. A storm rolled over Mercy Creek on a Thursday afternoon, turning the road to black paste and hammering the ranch roof so hard conversation became gestures. Luke was in the barn with the horses, and Mercy was putting pans under leaves. Clara was teaching Nell sums when a rider came through the downpour with a mail sack tucked under his coat. The letter from the county clerk was damp at the edges. Clara opened it with a kitchen knife because her hands shook too badly to break the seal. There was no birth record for Clara Whitcomb, but there was an old inquiry. 24 years before, after a washed-out bridge east of town, a baby girl had been found in the arms of a dead woman near the wreckage of a freight wagon struck by floodwater. The woman carried no papers. The child wore a silver locket engraved with the letters CB. The child had been taken by Hiram Whitcomb, banker, who claimed she was kin and promised to file guardianship. No guardianship was found. Clara read the lines 3 times. The cabin seemed to tilt around her. Aunt Mercy took the paper and read it once. Her mouth flattened. "Nell," she said, "go fetch your father." The child ran. Clara sat down before her knees failed. "Does CB, you ever have a locket?" Aunt Mercy asked. "My father kept my mother's jewelry locked away. He said it pained him. Men have hidden worse under grief." Luke entered with rain streaming from his hat. One look at Clara, and he removed it. She handed him the letter. He read it slowly. His face did not show surprise so much as recognition. "What?" Clara asked. "What is it?" Luke folded the paper carefully. "My mother used to tell of that flood. Said there was a woman found east of town. Said Hiram came himself and took the child before anyone could ask much." "Why would your mother know? She helped lay out the dead." Aunt Mercy's eyes narrowed. "Your mother kept journals." Luke looked at her. Clara stood. "Where?" "In a trunk in my room," Aunt Mercy said. "But before you go running after hope, remember journals burn. Ink fades and dead women do not testify." "Still," Clara said, "they might tell the truth." The journal was wrapped in flour sacking and smelled of cedar. Luke's mother had written in plain, steady script about births, deaths, remedies, weather, and the 1,000 troubles of frontier women. They found the entry near the back. June 14. Storm took the East Bridge. Freight wagon lost. Woman dead. Fair hair, blue dress torn, ring on chain. Baby girl living. Fevered but strong. H. Whitcomb came after sundown. He knew the woman, though he said not how. Took from her hand a packet sealed in oilcloth. Child wore locket, CB. He said the child must be kept from Vale men. I did not like the fear in him. Clara pressed her hand over her mouth. "Vale men," Luke said. Aunt Mercy swore under her breath, then looked at Nell and said, "Forget that word." Nell nodded solemnly. Jasper Vale's family had come to Mercy Creek soon after the flood, buying cattle, land, and influence. Jasper's father was dead now, but Lavinia Vale remained. rich from holdings no one could quite trace. Jasper had been courting Clara for 6 months before Hiram pressed her to accept him, saying the match would secure the bank. Clara saw it then, not as a wedding but as a closing trap. "I need to speak with my father," she said. Luke's voice was careful. "Not alone." The next morning, they rode to town beneath a sky scrubbed clean by storm. Mercy Creek watched their arrival as if a circus had come. Clara wore Aunt Mercy's calico, her hair braided simply down her back. Luke rode beside her. In his saddlebag lay the county letter and his mother's journal. At the bank, the curtains were drawn, though the hour was late. Jasper stood behind the counter, speaking with the teller. When Clara entered, the room went silent. "Well," Jasper said, "the runaway bride returns. I came for Hiram Whitcomb. He is resting. He will see me." Jasper stepped around the counter. "You gave up the right to make demands when you refused settlement." Luke moved half a step forward. Clara put a hand out, stopping him. She had spent too many years in that building to be frightened by its polished counter and iron safe. "This bank holds a ledger of guardianships, trusts, and private deposits," she said. "I wish to see the entries from June of the year I was found." Jasper's smile thinned. "Found? So you know that much?" The teller looked down. Clara's heart pounded, but her voice stayed even. "Where is my father?" A door opened behind the counter. Hiram Whitcomb stood in the doorway to his private office, thinner than he had been at the wedding, his beard untrimmed, his eyes shadowed. He looked at Clara, then at Luke, then at Jasper. "Come in," he said. Jasper's hand shot out. "Mr. Whitcomb, that is not wise." Hiram's old authority flashed for one instant. "This is still my bank." Inside the office, the smell of ink and leather nearly broke Clara. She had grown up in that room, sitting on the rug while Hiram worked, listening to the scratch of his pen like rain. Now, every shelf looked like a witness. Hiram closed the door. Clara placed the county letter and journal on his desk. "Who am I?" she asked. The old banker touched the papers but did not open them. "You are my daughter." "No," Clara said, and the word hurt them both. "That is what you wanted me to be." "Who am I?" Hiram sank into his chair. For a long while, only the street noise came through the window. Wagon wheels, a horse snort, someone laughing too loudly outside the saloon. At last he opened a drawer and removed a small iron key from his watch chain. His hands trembled as he unlocked a lower cabinet. From it, he took a tin box. Inside lay a silver locket, darkened by age, and a packet sealed in cracked oilcloth. Clara reached for the locket first. The letters CB were nearly worn smooth. Inside was a tiny curl of fair hair and a scrap of paper, browned at the edges. Clara Bell. The name seemed to rise from the dead and enter the room. Hiram covered his eyes. "Her name was Clara Bell Hart," he said. "Her mother was Miriam Hart. Her father was Elias Hart. My partner before Mercy Creek had a bank worth robbing." "Robbing?" Luke asked. Hiram looked at him, then back at Clara. Elias discovered that Silas Vale had been using freight contracts to hide stolen deposits and land deeds. Elias meant to take proof to the territorial marshal. The storm came. The bridge washed out. Vale's men were on that road. By morning, Elias was gone. Miriam was dead. And the packet was in my hand. Clara's voice shook. "And you hid me." "I hid you from men who had already killed for paper. You changed my name. I gave you mine. You never filed guardianship. I had. Vale would have found the record. Jasper found enough to shame me." Hiram flinched. Clara leaned over the desk. "Why let me marry him?" "Because I thought peace had become safer than truth," Hiram whispered. Jasper came with old threats. He knew there had been a child. He did not know the whole of it, but he knew enough. He said if you married him, he would let the past sleep. The bank was strained. Your inheritance was tied in lands Vale wanted. I told myself a husband could protect you. A husband who called me nameless before town. Hiram bowed his head. Luke's voice was low. Where's the proof against Vale? In that packet. And in the old trust ledger. Then bring it to the judge, Clara said. Hiram looked toward the door. Jasper has the ledger. The room chilled. He took it after the wedding, Hiram said. Said until matters were settled, the bank records must be protected from a distressed woman and a sentimental old man. Clara closed the locket in her fist. Then we take the packet. Hiram pushed the oilcloth toward her. Not through the front door. Jasper will have men watching. Luke took the packet and slipped it inside his coat. There is a back stair. Clara almost smiled grimly. I learned to sneak sugared almonds from the kitchen when I was 8. They left by the rear. But Jasper was not a fool. His men followed before they reached the library. The chase did not begin with gunfire. It began with the quiet scrape of boots behind them, the sudden closing of shutters. The way the livery owner looked away when Luke asked for his horse. Take mine, Clara said. She is faster. You ride her. I know the Greek path. You do not? There was no time to argue. They mounted and took the alley behind the mercantile just as Jasper shouted from the bank steps. Rainwater still filled the ruts. Clara bent low over the mare's neck, skirts whipping, Luke behind her on his bay. They crossed behind the church, cut through the wash, and reached the open road north as 2 riders came hard after them. At Cedar Draw, the creek ran high from the storm. Clara's mare balked at the water. Clara! Luke called. She heard hooves behind them. She saw Jasper's man lifting a pistol, not to kill perhaps, but to frighten the horse and send her down. Clara leaned forward, whispered the animal's name, and gave her the rein. The mare plunged into the creek. Water rose to Clara's knees. For one terrible moment, the current shoved them sideways, and then the mare found footing and lunged up the far bank. Luke crossed after her. Turning once in the saddle, the first pursuer tried the crossing too fast. His horse stumbled, throwing him into the shallows. The second reined up, cursing. At the ranch, they thought themselves safe for one night. They were wrong. Near midnight, the barn caught fire. Nell screamed first. Luke was out of bed and across the yard before Clara found her boots. Flames climbed the high loft, bright and greedy, throwing sparks into the black sky. Horses battered their stalls, and Mercy dragged Nell to the water trough and shouted orders like a battlefield captain. Clara ran for the barn door, but Luke thrust a lead rope into her hands. Take the gray, pull hard, and do not let go. Smoke burned her eyes. The gray horse reared, dragging Clara through mud. But she held until Luke got a cloth over his face. Together they freed 3 horses. A fourth, a young mare heavy with foal, kicked against the back stall. A beam cracked overhead. Leave her, and Mercy shouted. Luke did not. Clara saw him vanish into smoke, and the sight tore through her with such force she could not breathe. She tied the gray to the fence and ran after him, dropping low as heat rolled above her. Luke had the mare's halter, but the animal would not move. Clara grabbed a grain sack, shook oats across the floor, and called in the soft nonsense voice she used with Nell's stubborn pony. The mare stepped once, then again. The burning beam fell where Luke had been standing a heartbeat before. He shoved Clara toward the door. They stumbled out as the loft collapsed behind them. By dawn, the barn was a smoking skeleton. 2 horses were burned. Half the winter hay was gone. Luke's hands were blistered. Clara's hair was singed at one side. Nell sat wrapped in a quilt, silent with shock. In the ashes near the back wall, Luke found a scrap of cloth caught on a nail. Fine gray wool, the kind Jasper's hired men wore. And Mercy spat into the dirt. There is your wedding present. Luke stood looking at the ruins of his barn, and Clara knew what the fire meant. Without hay, he might lose cattle. Without cattle, he could not pay the note. Without the note, Jasper could take the ranch before any judge heard Clara's claim. That afternoon, a rider delivered Jasper's offer. Clara was to come to town by sundown and sign away all claims under the names Clara Whitcomb, Clara Bell, or any related estate. In exchange, Jasper would extend Luke's mortgage, replace the burned hay at a fair price, and withdraw any accusation that Luke had stolen bank property. If she refused, the note would be called at first light. Luke read the offer once and tore it in half. Clara picked up the pieces. "You cannot decide for me." His eyes flashed. "I will not let you sell your name from my barn. Nell sleeps under your roof. She is my child to protect. And you think I can watch her lose her home because of me? Because of Jasper? Because I brought his wrath here?" Luke stepped close, anger and fear roughening his voice. "Listen to me. Before you came, he wanted this land. After you leave, he will still want it. The only difference is whether he gets to use your sacrifice as his receipt." Clara's eyes filled then, not from weakness but from the cruelty of being offered a choice in which every road wounded someone she loved. "I have been Hiram's daughter, Jasper's bride, the town's scandal, and a dead woman's child," she said. "I do not know how to be only myself." Luke's anger broke thin. "Start by not signing lies." She looked at him through tears. "And if your ranch falls?" He glanced toward the blackened barn, then toward Nell, sitting on the porch with Aunt Mercy. "My land is not worth your soul." The words settled deep. That evening, Clara did not go to town. Instead, she took the wedding dress from Aunt Mercy's trunk. The satin had been cut partly apart for altar cloths, but the bodice remained intact. In the inner lining, where St. Louis seamstresses had stitched fine boning, Clara felt something stiff that had not belonged there. Aunt Mercy brought a knife. Hidden between satin and lining was a narrow envelope addressed in Hiram's hand. "For Clara, if courage fails me." Inside was a letter and a small map. Hiram had written it months before the wedding. He confessed the hidden guardianship, the heart name, the veiled threat, and the location of the old trust ledger, not in the bank safe, as Jasper believed, but in the abandoned depot freight room, where Hiram had hidden it after Jasper first came sniffing through the records. The ledger Jasper had taken was a copy with enough truth to tempt him and enough gaps to condemn him if compared against the original. Clara lowered the letter. Aunt Mercy gave a soft whistle. Old Fox still had teeth. Luke studied the map. "The depot freight room is locked." Clara touched the locket at her throat. The little silver key Hiram had kept on his watch chain hung beside it now. "No," she said. "He is waiting." They rode before dawn. Luke's hands were bandaged, so Clara saddled the horses. Aunt Mercy insisted on coming as far as the ridge, with a shotgun across her lap in the wagon. Nell hugged Clara fiercely and whispered, "Bring your name back." The abandoned depot stood 2 miles east of Mercy Creek, left behind when the railroad shifted its stop closer to town. Its roof sagged, and weeds grew through the platform boards. Morning fog clung to the tracks. Somewhere far off, a train whistle cried, lonely and thin. Clara and Luke entered through a side door swollen by rain. The freight room smelled of rot and old coal smoke. Mice scattered. Clara found the iron lock beneath a tangle of spider webs. The little key turned with a reluctant click. Inside, beneath a false board, lay the ledger wrapped in oilcloth. Luke lifted it carefully. "We take it to Bellamy." Clara nodded. Then Jasper's voice came from the doorway. I thought you might." He stood with Sheriff Dodd, 2 armed men, and Lavinia Vale behind him, wrapped in black silk. Jasper's face was pale with fury, but his voice remained smooth. "Put it down, Ransom. You are already facing theft, arson, and whatever else the sheriff can be made to understand." Sheriff Dodd looked miserable. "Luke, best hand over the book until this is sorted." Clara stepped forward. "Sheriff, that ledger proves forgery, fraud, and murder." Lavinia laughed softly. Murder. Dear child, grief has made you dramatic. Clara looked at the older woman. You knew my mother. Something flickered in Lavinia's eyes. Jasper saw it and raised his pistol. Enough! Luke moved before Clara could think. He pushed her behind a stack of crates just as the shot cracked. Splinters jumped from the wall. The horses outside screamed. Sheriff Dodge shouted, suddenly understanding too late that law and power were not the same thing. Clara fell hard. The ledger clutched to her chest. Luke dragged a crate down, blocking another shot. His bandaged hands left blood on the wood. Back door, he said. You are bleeding. Back door. They ran through the freight room while the sheriff struggled with Jasper near the entrance. Lavinia shouted orders. One of the hired men circled outside. Clara and Luke burst onto the far platform and found their horses gone, scattered by gunfire. The morning train whistle sounded again, closer now. Clara looked down the track and saw smoke. The judge was in Mercy Creek. The evidence was in her arms. Jasper's men stood between them and Town Road, but the rail line ran straight past the new depot, and the incoming train was slowing for its stop. Luke followed her gaze. No. Yes, Clara. She grabbed his hand. You told me not to sign lies. Now run. They ran along the old track bed, boots slipping on wet gravel, the ledger heavy against Clara's ribs. Behind them, Jasper shouted. A gun fired once, then again. The train thundered nearer, iron wheels screaming, smoke rolling low. At the bend, the engine slowed enough for the grade. Luke caught the side ladder of a freight car first, nearly losing his grip with his burned hands. Clara shoved the ledger up to him. He hauled it, then reached down for her. For one moment, running beside the moving train, Clara thought of the wedding aisle. How every step then had taken her away from the life she knew. This time every step carried her toward the truth. She caught Luke's hand. He pulled her onto the ladder as the train groaned toward Mercy Creek. By the time they reached the depot, half the town had gathered, because gunshots carry faster than sermons. Luke dropped down first, then helped Clara. Her dress was torn. His hands bled through the bandages. Soot streaked both their faces. Judge Bellamy, a small man with a white mustache and a traveling coat, had just stepped from the passenger car. Clara walked straight to him and held out the ledger. My name is Clarabelle Hart, she said, her voice carrying over the platform. I was raised as Clara Whitcomb. I asked the court to hear proof before Jasper Vale marries it. The crowd went silent. Jasper arrived minutes later, dirty with mud and rage. Sheriff Dodd behind him with a pistol drawn, not at Luke this time, but at Jasper's back. The hearing took place in the only space large enough for the crowd, the wedding tent, still standing at the edge of town because no one had known whether to take it down. Its white canvas was stained now by dust and rain. The flowers were wilted. The aisle remained. Clara walked into it again, not in satin, not veiled, not leaning on any man's promise. Luke walked beside her until the front row, then stopped, letting her go forward alone. Judge Bellamy set the ledger on the preacher's table. Hiram Whitcomb was brought from the bank by the doctor, weak but upright. When he saw Clara, his face folded with grief. I will speak, he said, and he did. Before the town that had watched him stay silent, Hiram told of Elf Elias and Miriam Hart, of the flood, of the packet, of the veil threats, of his own cowardice dressed as protection. He confessed he had hidden Clara's name and failed to give her the truth. He did not excuse it. That did more to quiet the town than any excuse could have. Then the ledger was open. There were entries in Elias Hart's hand showing deposits stolen through Vale freight contracts. There was a deed to Cedar, draw water rights, held in trust for Clara Belle Hart. There were notes showing Hiram had protected the property under false account numbers. There were later pages in a different hand, imitating Hiram's script, altering mortgages, adding penalties, shifting debts from Vale Holdings onto smaller ranchers. Clara recognized Jasper's writing from the settlement paper. So did the teller. So did Sheriff Dodd when Judge Bellamy made him read the loops and slants aloud. Lavinia Vale sat like stone until the old packet was open. Inside was a letter from Elias Hart naming Silas Vale and his partners. Another paper bore Lavinia's signature as witness to a freight transfer made 2 days after Elias had supposedly vanished. The town learned then that Clara had not been nameless. She had been hidden. It learned that Luke's mortgage had been altered. It learned that Jasper's wedding day telegram had been requested by Jasper himself and worded to wound rather than reveal. It learned that Hiram Whitcomb had lied out of fear and pride, and Jasper Vale had lied for land, money, and power. When Judge Bellamy ordered Jasper held for forgery, fraud, and attempted violence, Jasper stood so fast his chair fell. "This town will choose a nameless woman over me," he shouted. Clara turned. "No," she said. "It will choose the truth over you." Sheriff Dodd took Jasper's pistol. No one stopped him. Perhaps the town had found its courage at last, late and ashamed, but real enough to matter. Afterward, under the torn wedding tent, Hiram approached Clara. He looked older than any man she had ever seen. "I do not ask you to forgive me today," he said. "Good," Clara answered softly. "I cannot give what is not yet grown." He nodded, accepting the wound he had made. "But you were my father," she said. "Not by paper, not by blood, by mornings at the ledger, by soup when I was sick, by every time you checked the stove before bed. You should have trusted that love could survive the truth." Hiram's eyes filled. "I was afraid it would not. It might have hurt," Clara said, "but it would not have left me alone in a wedding tent." He bowed his head. "I am sorry, Clara Bell." She touched the locket at her throat. "Clara Bell Whitcomb Hart," she said, "until I decide otherwise, for the first time in days." Hiram almost smiled. A banker's long name. A woman's own name. Luke waited outside the tent near the hitching rail, giving her space as he always did. Clara found him watching the sunset stain the depot roof red. "Your mortgage is clear," she said. "So the judge told me. And the water rights belong partly to the Hart Trust." "So he told me too." She stood beside him. "I suppose that makes us neighbors in a legal sense." Luke glanced at her. "Only legal." The question was quiet, but it carried all the unsaid things between them. The old misunderstanding, the wedding aisle, the calf in the wire, the burned barn, the train ladder, his hand reaching down, hers reaching up. Clara looked toward the tent where life had broken open. "I will not step from one man's claim into another's," she said. Luke nodded at once. "I would not ask it. I need time to know my name when no one is shouting it. I can wait." She believed him. That was the beginning. Summer turned slowly toward autumn. Jasper and Lavinia were taken east for a trial. Some townsfolk came to Clara with apologies folded awkwardly in their hands. She accepted some, refused others, and learned that dignity did not require pleasing everyone. Hiram resigned daily control of the bank to a new board appointed under Judge Bellamy's oversight. He kept a small desk in the corner and worked when his strength allowed. Clara reviewed the old accounts and helped restore stolen money where it could be restored. Ranchers who had avoided the bank for years began stepping through its doors again, wary but hopeful. She did not move back above the bank. She took a small house near the schoolyard and opened the abandoned schoolhouse 3 mornings a week for children whose families lived too far for regular lessons. Nell was her first pupil and her sternest helper, and Mercy donated curtains made from the wedding satin, cut plain and hemmed strong. When sunlight passed through them, the room glowed soft as forgiveness. Luke rebuilt the barn with help from men who had once sat silent in the wedding tent. He did not ask them why they had waited so long to stand. He gave them hammers and let the work answer. He courted Clara as the frontier allowed. Slowly, with fence mending, shared coffee, a repaired porch step, rise to the ridge, and evenings when he listened more than he spoke. He never called her by a name she had not chosen. Sometimes she was Clara, sometimes Miss Hart when he teased her for correcting his figures. Once, when she scolded him for lifting beams before his hands had healed, he called her Mrs. Schoolhouse, and she laughed so hard, Nell came running. In October, the church bell rang for a harvest gathering, under the same white tent, washed and raised anew. No wedding had been planned. Mercy Creek simply needed a place large enough for music, food, and the first easy laughter the town had heard in months. Clara arrived in a blue dress she had sewn herself, the silver locket at her throat. Hiram came on her arm, moving slowly with a cane. When they reached the tent entrance, he stopped. "I failed you here," he said. Clara looked down the aisle. She could still see the ghost of herself in satin, walking out with no name while the town stared. Then she saw the school children hanging paper stars. She saw Aunt Mercy setting pies in a row. She saw ranchers clasping Luke on the shoulder near the far pole. She saw Nell waving with both hands. "No," Clara said. "You failed me before this. Here is where I began to learn it." Hiram breathed in sharply, then nodded. Luke crossed the tent toward her. He did not hurry. He had learned her pace, and she had learned his patience. When he reached her, he removed his hat. "Miss Clara Bell Whitcomb Hart," he said, and there was warmth in every piece of it. "Would you care to walk with me?" She took his arm. The town watched, but it no longer felt like judgment. It felt like witness. They walked not to an altar, not yet, but through the tent and out the other side into the amber light beyond. The prairie wind lifted the canvas behind them. A train whistle sounded from the depot, clear and distant. Luke's hand covered hers where it rested on his sleeve, steady and unpossessive. Months later, when winter softened into spring and the first bluebonnets opened along Cedar Jaw, Clara did marry him beneath that tent. She came down the aisle with Hiram on one side and Nell on the other. When the preacher asked her name, she spoke it herself, strong enough for the last row to hear. "Clara Bell Whitcomb Hart." Then she looked at Luke and added, "Soon to be Ransom, by my own choosing." There was laughter then, gentle and full, and more than one person wiped tears without shame. The banker's daughter had walked out of a wedding tent with no name, but she returned with all of them. Born, given, hidden, wounded, chosen. And when the sun went down over Mercy Creek, the white tent shone against the prairie like a clean page, while Clara and Luke rode home side by side, past the bank, past the depot, past the road where lies had chased them, toward a ranch where a lantern light waited in the windows and every name spoken at the door was spoken with love.